All right. Sitaram Dass, thank you very much for coming on here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So, yeah, if you want to just start this thing off, taking us through how you found the path, how you found Ram Dass, how you came to write your book, and how you came to be on camera on a microphone in front of me here, and anything else you want to tell us, and we can get the ball rolling.
Okay. Yeah, we'll start with that. And feel free to interrupt me or ask any questions. But the moment when I really clearly knew that there was a path, I want to say I was 19 or 20, and I had been experimenting heavily with psychedelics. And I was just in a very exploratory phase in my life. I was fundamentally not happy. I wasn't happy with the state of the world or society or my place in it. And everything kind of felt meaningless, kind of that existential dread that was very all pervading in my consciousness, just trying to find meaning and not knowing where to look. I also had my own history of trauma and things that I was healing from. And a lot of that was an unconscious process at that point. And through psychedelics, it was just glimmers that there was something else, right? That there was something that my rational mind couldn't explain. And that started me on a long journey of exploring various spiritual texts and religious texts and philosophical texts and even modern thinkers, people like Robert Anton Wilson, and just exploring conspiracy theories. I mean, just really just opening my mind to the widest net that I could. I didn't necessarily know what was what was real or not, but I was just opening up, just to try and figure it out. Mm-hmm. And that led me on a long journey where I started to, over time, gravitate towards, at some point it dawned on me that just taking psychedelics and reading these books wasn't going to do it for me. I had to find some way to integrate into my life. And so starting to pick up some form of spiritual practice, still very experimental. And through this process, I really started to dive more and more and gravitate more and more towards Ram Dass as a teacher and a thinker. And it was also something I couldn't explain, but the way he said things, it just resonated with me. I felt like when I was reading a lot of these other texts, like maybe ancient religious texts, or I was doing a lot of translation and filtering in my mind to make it work for me. But with him, it just felt like he was speaking right to me, in a language that I could understand and that I resonated with and I got. And through luck or grace, whatever perspective people want to look at it through, when I was 23, before that, I basically dropped out of everything. I spent a year of my life where I just dropped out at age 22, and I was living out of my car in the desert of New Mexico and seeing spiritual healers and trying to do spiritual practices. And it was like my attempt to try and live as a sadhu. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was sincere. There was a lot of youthful passion and sincerity, even though I didn't really know what I was doing. And then through that, I decided I needed to come back to where I'd been living in Seattle, Washington. And I needed to try and figure out some way to be grounded, right? Again, just figuring out some step towards integration. And I was there and I was working a job and reading spiritual texts and exploring. I was studying with different energy healers and spiritual healers. And it was the first time I did an extended Vipassana sit. And, so still just trying to figure life out. And at some point it dawned on me that there was all these people that I wish that I could have met. Aldous Huxley and, all these people. And I realized that the person at the top of that list was Ram Dass, and that he was still alive. So if there's any chance that I could meet him, I just felt like I should put some effort towards that, some good effort. I didn't have any direction. And there was nothing more than just that. It was just to meet him like once, that was the first thought. And that one thought led to a whole series of happenstance and synchronicities and things just lining up perfectly where I was able to meet him. And I went with a friend. He lived on Maui during the last decade plus of his life. And my friend said this because I wouldn't have had the nerve, but it was my idea. I'd been talking about it. I'd been working this up. And my friend said, Ram Dass, we want nothing more in life than to be around you. So if you have anything that you need help with around the house, we'll do it. And Ram Dass said very matter-of-factly, well, I've been given this house to live in, but it's a little bit too big for us. So there's always things we need help with. If you were around, maybe there would be something you could do. I mean, that was the extent, but for me, that was everything. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do for my entire life. So I quit my job. I found some guy in the North Shore of Maui that let me pay him a little bit of money every month to sleep on his back porch. And I just uprooted my life and moved to Maui and started calling the house and I'm here and can I come? And finally, Dasima, who is Ram Dass's primary caregiver and incredible person, she called me and said, well, we're gardening tomorrow. You can come and help. And I thought I was just going to volunteer. And I went and I worked for a few hours and then she paid me and said I could come back the next day. And I remember thinking, I did it. I found my life purpose. I'm going to be Ram Dass's gardener. That was like, that was enough for me. I was just so ecstatic. And then over time, building a relationship, I came to find, when I first reached out, they weren't sure if I was some crazy person or not. You could imagine that Ram Dass got emails like the one I sent often. So once they saw, that I came and I worked and that, I wasn't going to cause anyone any harm. I was sincere. Mm-hmm. I built a relationship and I got to do more things. And eventually they asked me to move in and to work as one of his caregivers. And I did that for a few years. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. How many other people were there taking care of him?
Well, living at the house at that time when I was there, it was just the three of us, just Ram Dass, Dasima, and me. Wow. There was more times though when, like the amount of times when it was just the three of us wasn't that often because there's always guests coming through. Mm-hmm. Ram Dass had just he had tons of friends, ranging from, spiritual teachers, Dharma teachers, to political activists, to psychonauts, so that was a cool thing. I mean, I just got to hang around at the dinner table and all these cool people are there and I just get to witness all of these incredible conversations. Mm.
Now, when you met him in the physical vessel of Ram Dass, was it a lot different from listening to an audio recording of him on YouTube? Like when you entered the room and saw him for the first time, was there something that just hit you and you're like, whoa? Yeah.
There definitely was. And there's two sides of that. One is, most of the lectures that we listen to and love and watch, they're from Ram Dass when he was younger and when he had this true power of just speech, right? I mean, it was like an art form. And the fact that he could connect to these ineffable spiritual truths through language was incredible. But when I met him, he had a stroke. He was in his 80s. He had aphasia. So speech was very slow. But through that, he gained another power, which is that he really, truly, in that later phase of his life, embodied what he had taught throughout his life. I mean, he just became it. And yeah, when I first met him, for one, Ram Dass's house had 2 stories and he's in a wheelchair. So we're on the back porch. And so he has this like wheelchair elevator thing. And so he's like literally like descending from the heavens, and I'm like starstruck. I mean, this is my hero, my teacher. I had read every single book, almost every single book at that point, every video I could find on YouTube. This was before the Be Here Now network and all that. So you had to dig a little bit more, but I, looked at all of it. And so here's the person. But even more than that, what really astounded me was, because even if you just meet someone once, we all have an ability to open up and to allow this deeper space to come through. And in those kind of meetings, oftentimes just the best and deepest parts of people can come forward, right? And then also there's room for all of our individual projections. And I definitely had him on a pedestal. But living with him, that's when it really sunk in just how real the presence was. Because when you live with someone, you start to see all their stuff. You can't pretend they're not a human anymore. And I very quickly got to see Ram Dass as a human. But that depth of presence and love that he emanated, it was real and it was always there. And you could just feel it. I mean, just being in his presence, it did something. Mm. And that's what really astounded me. That glimpse I got in that first meeting, that stayed the entire 3 years that I was in Hawaii.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I feel as though this, that ineffable love that you felt is almost like a baton that you pass on, or almost like maybe a virus, like some kind of contagion that these people like, Neem Karoli Baba or Ram Dass, they embody. Like that is them. They are love. And it's almost, like I said, it seems like something that needs to be spread in a way. And I guess, yeah, if you come into physical contact with somebody like Ram Dass, there's no other choice. Like it's going to hit you. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's well said, the way you said it. Ram Dass used to say this. I'd heard him say it multiple times, that Bhakti, which is a specific word from India, and it's about a specific spiritual path, but ultimately it means love. It's this love we're talking about. That Bhakti is spread from one soul to another. Those that don't have it catch it from those that do. And yeah, it's not something that can be taught. It's a transmission. And that transmission can happen through words, but it's not an intellectual understanding. I mean, sometimes we need our mind to be primed in a way so that our mind can stop blocking us from being able to receive that love, right? So there's room for that, but it is just a transmission, and it's not something that can be faked either.
Yeah. It's like a frequency, like you kind of turn the dial a little bit on your radio signal and you turn to the love frequency. And then I guess from there, is it like, would you say it's almost stronger than all other frequencies? Like it's something that is like more resonant than, all the other frequencies that you can say that we get on a day-to-day basis. The frequency of true love is just like, once you feel it, you never let it go. Even though there might be days where it's like, oh, you're not feeling the love as much per se, but it's always there. I always like to say it's always there to tune to. It's like that ineffable, infinite love that's always there for us.
Yeah. Well, and the reason for that is that in a way it can be helpful to think of it as like a frequency, but it's also ultimately it's the backdrop of all frequencies, right? And so that's why it's always there. And maybe another way, I'm just thinking of this right now, but just with this radio dial metaphor, right? Maybe it's more like sometimes you can tune in between frequencies so that that space can then just allow what is already present to be heard. Because we're minimizing the other stuff. But this is where, through the path and through this deepening, what starts to happen is that as we start to develop a relationship with it, we start to be able to know it to be there, even in the midst of all the frequencies, right? All the stuff, our thoughts, our daily concerns, suffering, the news, like whatever the things are that normally distract us, we start to be able to be with that while also resting in that which is deeper than it.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Very well said. Do you think it's like, I guess our destiny for all beings to embody that love? It's just that, there's a select few right now kind of leading the way, being the pathfinders of this love. But could you see a world where 8 billion people are on that wavelength?
Well, it's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, but I dance between two perspectives for that. And with these kind of things, I think it's helpful to think about it rather than something being true or false, to thinking about, is this idea helpful or not, or skillful or not in this moment, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, it's inevitable in that it's true, it's reality. So this is actually who we are. This is our birthright. So all falsehoods are going to fall away. So all identifications that aren't based in truth, they're going to fall away. And eventually that's all that's left. Now, whether or not that's something that happens in this lifetime or even this physical world, or is that something that happens for people after leaving this world? I don't know the answer to that. But in terms of a working model, it does seem fruitful for me to be working towards that world that you're describing while fully honoring the world that we have now, which has immense suffering and chaos and destruction and oppression. There's the root level of natural suffering, and then we have added layers of human caused suffering on top of that. That's the world that we have right now. And so, yeah, having a vision of a better world where love is more at the center and the root of how things function, that seems like a fruitful thing to work towards. Sometimes it can be helpful to think that world is coming and inevitable, because that can give us a strength to do the work that's needed now. But sometimes I think it can be more fruitful and helpful to think about it that's not a given. And sometimes that can actually inspire the motivation we need to do the work now, because ultimately that's what's important, right? The future is the future. But right now, in this moment, the work, as far as I can tell, is to work to open my heart as much as I can and to act out of that truth, which, as far as I can tell, means being of service in some way and finding the parts in my mind that, those selfish tendencies, those parts of me that want to take from others and want to extract, and to work with those and gain a deeper awareness of them so that I can act from a deeper place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Be here now.
Be here now.
Yeah, it's gonna take a little work, but yeah, I think it's inevitable. But yeah, it's only inevitable if we make it inevitable. It's literally up to us. And that world might not even be the same world. It might be extremely different from the one that we currently live in. But I think it is. It might take 100 years. It might take 1,000 years. It might not even be on Earth. But I think it is inevitable for the human race as consciousness to embody our true state, our true bliss that we actually are. But yeah, it's all up to us to still live in this bodily vessel and do the work that we need to do to better ourselves. And then from there, we better the world. Yes.
I've heard people ask this question of Ram Dass actually multiple times. I heard it happen in person though, and it was about the concept of 2012. Mm-hmm. Right? As you remember, there's a time with the Mayan calendar and all these theories about the end of the world, or is it the end of the world as we know it, or is it the coming of this beautiful golden age, right? And someone asked Ram Dass his thoughts on that. And what he said was, well, the way I see it, if 2012 is the end of the world, then my job in this moment is to quiet my mind, open my heart, and to be of service. And if 2012 is this heralding of the golden age, then my job in this moment is to quiet the mind, open the heart, and to work to be of service. Mm-hmm. You know, so to him, that question didn't really matter or hold much weight to him.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like all we can do is what you just said. That's quiet the mind, be of service. Yeah. That's really all that we can do. It's all up to us to find out how we are of service, definitely, and do our work and go within. But yeah, I guess that's all we can do at this point. Don't overcomplicate it.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. How were you different before you came in to meet Ram Dass, and then after Ram Dass? Was there something that changed?
Well, this is what I can say for certain that changed, is that before meeting Ram Dass, I had some earth-shattering transpersonal experiences that had changed the course and direction of my life, but I didn't have necessarily direction or a clear path or guidance. And I didn't necessarily know that it was possible in an embodied sense to really rest from the truth of those experiences. And what I saw from being around Ram Dass is that this loving awareness that we're talking about, we've used different words to describe it, but that it's real, that it's real, it's our birthright, it's the root of our being, and that it's accessible, right? Because Ram Dass never pretended not to be human, and because throughout his life, he left this trail of teachings, and you can see him at different stages of his journey, and you can see where he's caught. And basically he just opened up. He even talked about in some of his early lectures, him realizing that rather than him being a teacher, really he was a teaching, and that his job was just to open up, and this is where I'm at this moment. I'm just going to be as transparent as possible. And I don't even think he knew when he was doing that where he would end up at the end of his life. So we have this trail of his life, and so we can see a very clear path. And I got to see how that manifested, which is that a human being that had his stuff just like me and just like you was really, truly, deeply able to rest in the space of loving awareness, and did it in the midst of immense suffering. I lightly said he had had a stroke and aphasia, but this meant that he was in a wheelchair. Essentially half his body didn't work. He had neuropathy. There was extreme pain in his body, in his mind. His mind was very sharp, but the verbal language was very slow, and he had to struggle to find words. And so there a mass amount of suffering. And he used that as grist for the mill of his awakening, to use his own language. He really used it. And he actually truly, when he talked about loving awareness, he brought that into even his own suffering. So he was really, truly at a deep place and also at a deep stage of his practice, right? I mean, he was actively loving his own suffering. So I saw that this love is real, that it's accessible, that it's our birthright, and that there's a path, and that path is worthwhile to take. And so it just cleared up how I want to spend my time, and also gave me some motivation to orient my life in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Now, why would you say the path is worthwhile to take?
Well, it's worthwhile because that depth of love and presence that he embodied, it's just more real than everything else. And when you see that, maybe it's more just like nothing else makes as much sense anymore. And so it's just what's left, you know. I do my daily practices. I try and live a life of service. I try and be as honest as I can with people. You know, I really try and take on truth and transparency as a practice. I try and form intimate friendships with other people on the path. So I have mirrors, and, you know, I'm really trying to take the whole of the spiritual life to deepen into my being as much as I can. Because, well, there's one angle we can look at it where I've been inspired and I feel dedicated, and that puts a lot of emphasis on the will, which is a fine perspective to take. But there's another element of this too, where it's just grace manifesting moment to moment in our lives. And really, when I'm in the depths of it, whether I'm doing practice or not, it doesn't feel like I'm in control of my life anymore.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Like there's a certain sense of guidance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But it's like, I know what you mean. I feel as though I am in control, but it's like controlling with a certain direction, like a certain kind of purpose. You know, it's like I don't feel it's not much different than before I found the path, but it is. It's like it is and it isn't at the same time. But what's different is that, like, I know when I'm on the path and I know when I'm kind of strayed away from it. And, you know, once you step on the path, it's like you don't really look past it. There's no other way to really live. I mean, there are other ways to live, but it's like there's only, I don't know. It's only like there's only one true way to live, in my mind, at least, to find peace. Ultimately, it brings me to more of a sense of peace on a day-to-day life, knowing that there is some kind of like sanctuary of a lifestyle that I can resort to that brings me to see my suffering in a different light. You know, to see it. That's, you know, it's whatever. It's just the drama. It's the play of life. It's Leela. It's just something that we have to go through, and then on the other side of that, I'm like, oh, there's this spiritual path, which is that peace. And I come back to that love and the stillness and the bliss, and it's always there. And that's why it's worthwhile to me personally. It's that, like, a sense of just peace, a knowing of constant peace that's always there, that I can reside in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting. So this idea of like the will or control or not, when there's sometimes two perspectives that we can take through this spiritual path lens. One is the lens of surrender, right? Mm-hmm. And seeing it all as God's grace, and ultimately what we're doing is realizing that we're not in control. And then there's this other lens of maybe self-reliance where we just get really centered into what maybe we would call our true will. And we just get really clear on what we actually want. And we find that the more we rest in that, we have greater inner freedom to actually truly make a choice rather than just being flung around by, you know, our past conditioning, for instance, mm-hmm. right? But when we really rest into either of those perspectives, at the bottom of them, we're talking about the exact same thing. And that really gets into just this deep, intimate relationship that we have with the essence of reality, where an exercise that I've done and that I do a lot with people in my one-on-one work, after meditating for a bit, you'll just ask someone, what do you want? And it's a very interesting question because there's a sense of ownership, like, I want this, right? And then you say the same question. And what happens is you start to go through all your program responses, and then you just get left, there's just this spaciousness, this deep unknown mystery. And then the question's asked, and it really takes you into that core of surrender and will. And because what emerges, what you often will say in that space is a complete mystery to you. Sometimes, the moment before, you don't know that you're about to say it. So then the question arises, where did that come from? Right? It's what you want, but where did it come from? It didn't come from the mind. It didn't come from your individual sense of self. It came from somewhere else. And so it's really interesting. I'll share this story. I kind of skipped over it because I've been telling this story a lot lately, but it relates to this. When I met Ram Dass, so there was the decision that I just had to meet him. And I told some friends this, and then we looked up plane tickets, and we saw there was this window of time where we could find round trip tickets to Maui from Seattle for $260, which I had no money at that time. And that was just like, I could afford that. And it was just far enough out that I could probably get it off from work. And we were just so swept up in the moment that we bought it. And then I realized later that was crazy, that I had no connection to Ram. Like, we were just going to go to Maui and just like, we didn't know where he lived. So I wrote to the foundation, the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. This is the nonprofit that's grown out of around Ram Dass's teachings. And I just wrote to them and said, hey, I'm going to be on Maui. I'd like to meet Ram Dass. Is this possible? And I sent them essentially my whole story of whatever. It was like multiple pages long. It's kind of embarrassing now to think about. And I never heard a response. I was like, oh, okay. So, I start thinking about other ways to make the trip worthwhile. It's not going to work out. And then we watched Fierce Grace for the first time. It's the documentary about Ram Dass. And this is what's interesting. Before watching that, I had been reading Miracle of Love, which is the book that Ram Dass compiled stories about his guru, Neem Karoli Baba. And it's like the most far out stories you could imagine about a being. It's like just miracles and psychic powers. And, it's definitely something that stretches the mind. And I was definitely like, what is going on? Like, I know I like Ram Dass a lot and he seems honest and sane, but this book is really far out. And there's this one story in particular where he talks about being on a bus with a bunch of friends, and they don't know where Maharaji is. And so they're going to go to Delhi. And one of the people on the bus says, oh, we should turn here. There's this holy space here. It's where they have the Kumbh Mela. We should go and see it. And there's this debate. And finally, at the last minute, they're like, okay, we'll go check it out. We'll only spend 5 minutes. They go, and no one's there except Maharaji's just walking randomly with a person, already knows that they're coming, and already has food set aside. Like, it already has a meal plan for the exact number of people that are there. Because this story completely blew my mind, because it meant that Maharaji knew that they were coming before Ram Dass made that decision, which gets into this free will or not conversation. But I just couldn't believe that story. And I was thinking about it a lot. So I'm also listening during this time to Krishna Das obsessively. I had no idea that Krishna Das and Ram Dass knew each other or that they had the same guru. So now I'm watching Fierce Grace and I see Krishna Das tell that bus story in the movie. And it just completely blew my mind, because this person, the only person I was listening to, I was obsessed, was on that bus that Ram Dass told the story about that I was like thinking about constantly because I couldn't believe it. And it just completely cracked my mind. And I still can't explain it. But in that moment, I just knew that I was going to meet Ram Dass when I went to Maui. And so I wrote so then after the movie ends, I look up to see when Krishnadas was going to come to Seattle for a Kirtan because I had never seen him. And he was coming the day before I was going to fly to go to Maui. And it was just this moment of just, what is going on here? And then, I wrote another email and I did get a response and I did get to meet him and my whole life changed. So, but this is the thing. When I used to tell that story, the way I would tell it was because I followed that inner voice, the universe lined up and it lined up all these synchronicities and miracles and I got to meet him. But then over time, I was thinking about it more. And where did that impulse come from? Like that first impulse to like go meet him, that impulse to buy that plane ticket on the spot, like where did that come from really? And so that's where I just, what's really going on here? Yeah. When I met Ram Dass that first time, I told him my whole story, the whole thing, all of these details I just shared, as well as things that had happened before that. And he just said so matter-of-factly, no big deal. He said, well, you should know that no one comes in front of me unless Maharaji sent them. And, I didn't really understand what that meant, but I felt it in my chest. I felt the power of that. Mm-hmm. And that's really, to really answer your question of what I gained from Ram Dass, he lived in that universe of Guru Kripa, where he just saw his entire life as the grace of the Guru. And so being around him, I got to feel in an embodied sense what it was like to be in that world. And it just became my own worldview. Mm-hmm. I think that's another thing that's kind of passed on through transmission. Now that's that same faith I have. Everything that I do in my life is the Guru's grace. It's just grace unfolding before me. And I don't remember that moment to moment, but when I pause and I have those quiet moments, it's like, yep.
Yeah. Do you think that's the goal though? If there is a goal to this, is to continually reside in the Guru's grace?
Well, that's the thing about grace though, is that there's nothing about it to attain. So, when we get to this stage of the conversation, it gets hard to talk about it, right? Mm-hmm. But Hanuman, which in the lineage, the devotional lineage that I'm from, that I learned from Ram Dass and that he got from Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, we're devoted to Hanuman, who's a monkey god, who is both the totality of the universe, is a perfect form of God, but also is 100% devoted and of service to God. So it's like a Christ figure, right? We have that duality. And there's this quote from Hanuman that's well known, which he says, "When I know who I am, you and I are one. When I don't know who I am, I serve you." And that's probably as close as I can capture what the spiritual path is about. When we think that there's something to do, then yeah, we put in good effort. We try. And I want to crawl as close into just the bosom of God as I can. I want to get as close and intimate as possible. I want to just have the most intimate dance with Krishna. I want to fully just crawl up under Maharaji's blanket, right? Whatever metaphor, right? Just that juicy devotional. I just want to get as close as I can. And it's almost painful, right? But it's a pleasure type of pain. And at the same time, what that bhav, what that devotional mood awakens at the core of that, because what I'm just expressing in this devotional love poetry, the core of that is love. And because love is the essence of reality and the essence of my being, that even though there's a part of me that's yearning and striving and going towards, what that's awakening is the space of love that I can also simultaneously rest in. So it's both. I'm both striving and resting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the dance of duality, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow, you just described it very well there, man.
Well, I think you pulled it out of me.
Yeah, wow. Yes, to remain a humble servant in this bodily vessel, at the same time knowing that you are the totality. You are literally everything. But at the same time, that doesn't mean inaction. That also, actually, that gives me more action to serve, knowing that I am everything and everybody is me. That actually gives me more gumption to serve others and serve God, essentially. Yeah, that's the vibe. That's kind of what this whole path is about, I think, when, putting it in a realistic term, is that we're all just servants here. We're all just here to serve each other. And how you serve God is you serve your fellow man, your fellow woman. Yeah. And yeah, that's the gist of it, man. That's the dance. Yeah.
Because Hanuman also, he's said to be in the space where not only is Hanuman 100% devoted to Sitaram, to God, in Hanuman's chosen favorite form, but Hanuman actually sees God in the entire animate and inanimate universe. So when Hanuman is looking at the world, when Hanuman's looking at other beings, Hanuman is seeing the essence of Hanuman's devotion. So of course, Hanuman wants to be of service to everything. And this has been another big part of my path. And, in the writings in my book, it's a big piece that I bring in terms of, me really learning that a critical questioning of my own mind can, and it seems like it needs to be, a part of the spiritual life. Because when I look at all the programmings I have and all of the ways that I don't treat other people or the earth like as manifestations of God all the time, right? And collectively, we know that we don't do that. And collectively, we know that there's entire segments of the world, various people of various identities that we literally, some people we don't look at all, people in the prison system, for instance, and all sorts of other people on the planet. I mean, we do not look at them or treat them collectively as manifestations of God. So that's where that pull of the heart, that devotional path, that discrepancy there, that's going to cause pain. And there's something to look at there, because my devotion, if I really want to be in God's presence all the time, then that means at some point I have to look at that stuff. I have to look at those programmings. I have to look at all these segments of the world that aren't being treated that way. And there's probably going to be some natural pull to act in some way. Each of us, we have our own dharmas, but in some way, in some meaningful way, turning towards these blind spots, so to speak.
Yeah, I know what you mean. We have a long way to go. Little ways to go. I think this is just like the beginning of a new age. It seems to be, where love is just entering us. Maharaji invaded the West, right? I think you said that in the book or something like that, or somebody said that. And that's what it seems to be, man. It's like there's this new wavelength that we're all slowly getting on, and we realize the falsities of the world that we used to live in. But the new wavelength of love, it's here now, and I think it's going to take over. It's just a slow process. And yeah, we have a lot to work through, that's for sure. A lot of collective karma that we have to reap, or that we currently are reaping. But yeah, man, I think the future is bright, even though it seems a little bleak and we have a lot to work through. I think it's inevitable at this point. You know, it might be a little messy, but I think it's just some growing pains for the human species. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little too idealistic, but it's a good ideal to keep in the back of our heads, I think, because kind of it gives me hope, gives me a certain sense of faith in you know, in the order of things, you know, and that there is some kind of order at least, you know?
Yeah. Well, and even another thing that I think what gives me hope isn't so much thinking about a future possibility. I mean, sometimes it does, but what gives me hope is just that surrender to that inner intelligence. And something also about Hanuman. Hanuman was in that presence. I mean, full union, you know, what we just described, even while doing the work of relieving the world of suffering in that time, right? Whether or not we think that that's historical time or mythological time, however people want to relate to it. But so as Hanuman is literally battling demons to save the world, Hanuman is in union with God. That means a sense of inner spaciousness, contentment, even bliss. So that's really far out to think about. I know for myself, that doesn't mean like I do a lot of one-on-one work with people. And so I'm in a lot of situations where I'm really face to face with sometimes really heavy suffering. Okay. I don't ever want to feel like good about other people's suffering. So that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, when you're really open and you're with another person and they're in pain, you're going to feel that, right? That's part of what it means to have an open heart. And through this work, I've found that it is possible to feel and honor the totality of my human heart, the pain that's there, their pain, while also resting in a deeper spaciousness. And that actually gives me even more of a capacity to truly be present with someone. Mm-hmm. So it's not overlooking someone's suffering or like, oh, that's not bliss, right? Or like trying to bypass it or fully honoring it, but by resting in my own spaciousness, my own inner intelligence, the God within, as much as I can, like doing my own inner work, that actually gives me more of a strength to do what's needed in the moment, to relieve suffering, to be a good listener, to be a compassionate ear, to be insightful, right? Whatever is needed. So I don't pretend to know fully what Hanuman's inner state is, but that, based on my readings of the teachings and what I've heard Ram Dass teach and him talking about his own relationship with his own suffering, and from where I'm at this stage now, that gives me a window into what that means to be able to rest in bliss, Satchit Ananda, right? Our true nature, while in the midst of suffering. Mm-hmm. It's not one or the other. It's like both and.
Yep. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Wow. Pretty powerful statements. I'm liking this conversation. I want to switch it up a little bit though. I want to talk about the role of psychedelics and primarily psilocybin, because, you know, that's how Ram Dass got on the path, or at least that's how he kind of, you know, got nudged on the path. That's how I got on the path. And I'm guessing that's how you did as well. And I just want to know, like, what that showed you. Like, how did these psychedelics show you a different way to live?
Yeah, well, mushrooms were my first foray. Mm-hmm. And when I said earlier, this idea of seeing that there's something else, but not knowing what that was mushrooms that first offered me that. Really, my my deepest early experiences were with LSD. Now I see all psychedelics have their differences, and they all have their unique flavors, right? But I've come to see the importance of set and setting is even more important than what we're taking. So it just so happens that for me, LSD was my deepest catalyst. But, earlier we used that metaphor of the radio and turning the knob and finding that space between frequencies, right? And that when we see what's already and always true, not immediately, but it starts to become easier to see that, to be aware of that, to rest in that in the midst of the tumult of life. And for me, the first glimpse into the spaciousness of that, turning between those frequency channels, was with LSD, where I got to have a true moment of awareness where I was completely outside of my body and completely outside of my mind and my thoughts and my self-identifications, where there was literally nothing, yet something was there. And catching that glimpse of consciousness as the ground of being and the ground of reality, it does change things.
Yeah.
I mean, What about for you? How would you word how those early experiences shaped your spiritual path?
Very similarly. And it's also interesting too, because I don't really do it as much anymore. It was just something kind of like, when you get the message, hang up the phone, as Alan Watts says. So I got the message definitely on a high dose of mushrooms. And it was a message of just love that I've never felt before. Like love that was always there. Like this love that we're talking about this whole conversation. I felt that one night I took psilocybin by myself. And I never let that go. It was just like, it's really undescribable. And even just saying the word love isn't even describing it, because then there's other connotations attached to love. It's just like a feeling of, I can't even describe it, man. Some kind of connection that is just, I just can't let go. And it's almost like, grace, I guess you could say. Like I felt that, I just felt something like, I was just, of course, like it was just something that it just opened my eyes, my third eye, to just a different way to view what it really means to be a human being. And it's very hard to describe. It was just like this, 4 to 6 hour realization of coming to see what it means to be here, and what it truly means to be a human outside of this physical vessel. And it has to do a lot with love, that supreme love, not just love like, lust or like you see in the movies, like true, just unconditional love. And it was just like a force that it just invaded my whole being. And from that day on, I never let it go. I don't think I ever could. If I ever wanted to say, oh, that was all malarkey, that was all baloney, that was just me just tripping, I don't think I could ever do that, man. It was just such a powerful experience where it's forever ingrained inside of my being. So for that, I am thankful for psilocybin. And like Ram Dass says, psilocybin is my friend. I think you said that.
The word that came up for me, which is a word that Ram Dass has used to describe similar, but when you were describing it, it's really the sense of like home.
Yeah.
It's like just this, it's like there's this element where we're just looking to just try and figure out where we can finally just relax, where you just really just let go. And we don't know where to look. And what an incredible surprise that it's just us. It's just who we are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it showed me. It was like, what am I looking for the whole time? It's been here the whole time. It was almost like of course moment, you know?
Yeah.
And it's weird too, because I've spoken to many people that have had psychedelic experiences, and not all of them have that. Some of them just like, hey man, you know, like they had the colors and the cool shapes. And I'm like, yeah, but like, you know, did you feel it? And it doesn't, like, some people are turned on. Some people it's just like it's just another drug, quote unquote drug experience. But I think to the certain people that it turns on, it's something special.
Yeah. Yeah, this is true. I've seen it. And I always feel it important when we have these conversations in such a public way to point out that they're not necessary and they're not for everyone. And they can be damaging. You know, I've witnessed it. You know, if they're done without respect, without the proper container, I've seen someone. I've witnessed people, you know, cutting themselves with glass and having the cops called and them having to be hospitalized temporarily. They ended up okay. But I mean, I've seen, you know, in my younger years, you know, we didn't know what we were doing. And so it wasn't all great. It was a lot of experiment and trial and error. And there's one thing that's really beautiful about the modern therapeutics getting involved and the war on drugs loosening. I'm not going to say ending, but loosening in some holds, is that we're able to have just actual public conversations about like how to use them responsibly and to integrate them and how they can be used for healing. And so the benefit now is that, you know, especially for younger people that might be interested, you know, there's a lot of best practices that are just available. And, yeah.
Yeah. Do your research, be in a safe setting, safe people. Yeah, just do your research. There's plenty of research out there. That's why I always encourage people. I'm like, hey, just look up, you know, read a little about it, read other people's experiences, and make sure it's for you. And take it slow. If anybody is interested in, you know, take it slow, take it easy, because these are very powerful compounds that change your way of thinking and processing. And it could lead to some things that you don't necessarily want to do to yourself if you're not ready for it. So just be wary. They are powerful. They're beautiful and powerful, but also have to respect it. You have to respect psilocybin or any other psychedelic with with your utmost. What am I trying to say? You have to respect it. That's all I'm trying to say.
What comes to my mind is like surfing a really big wave. It's beautiful, but to be able to do that skillfully, there's an immense amount of respect for that. You know, I mean, because you're talking about a force of nature that we can't control, you know. So the other thing that you were sharing that I resonate with is I also don't actively partake in the same way. It's just few and far between. And the other thing is I found through things like breath work, and I've actually, the deepest psychedelic state now, I'm not going to say the deepest, the most stabilized I've ever been in that deep psychedelic transpersonal space was actually not on psychedelics. It was actually doing breath work. And what I've come to see, I mean, that really shown me that it's really not about the method, and psychedelics really aren't necessary. And the reason why I think I was able to be much more stabilized in that versus when I was first experimenting and I just got these awakenings is it just has to do with the quality of our minds, right? Which ultimately has to do with how we're living, the practices that we're doing, how much our life is in alignment with our values, how honest we're being, all of these things. There's a reason why, you know, like when we look at like Ashtanga yoga, like the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, there's a reason why, like essentially like daily living practices, like telling the truth, not stealing, like really just getting clean in your life, that those are the first practices that are laid out before even sitting practice, like meditation, right? In a lot of ways, those do more to give us an inner calm than even spiritual practices like meditating. So, how we live our life, all these things matter. And then the reason why I still find exploring these states helpful is because it's just like another lens to see where I'm at, in the last 6 months when I did that breath work and I truly rested in a very surrendered space for an extended period of time, that was really eye-opening for me. And it just gave me more fuel to keep going on my path, and also helped me let go even more of this idea that psychedelics need to be a necessary part. Not that they can't be, but yeah, I don't see any need to rely on them.
Mm-hmm. It's all in us.
Yeah.
It's all in us. There's different ways to go about it, but it all leads to the same path, the same goal, whatever you want to call it, the same seeding in our being. It's all there. Just different ways to access it.
Yeah. I'm curious to ask you, however much you feel comfortable talking about, but, you had mentioned that you really consider like Ram Dass as a teacher for you. And it sounds like, you're very familiar with Maharaji, and I'm just curious, just your own relationship to that, and where that sits is just in terms of your own life and viewpoint and spiritual life. And
oh man, I definitely very similar to you. I see him as, I have the list of teachers as well, but Ram Dass is up there. He's like, there's something about the way, like you said, his words, they're so simple and they're so just poignant in how they hit my being. Like there's been nights where I just throw on a Ram Dass lecture and fall asleep to it. And I don't know what it is. It's like he's telling you stuff that you already know. And it's like, it's like, it's almost like he knows. He knows. That's what it is. I'm like, oh, he knows. I've said that so many times. I'm like, oh, this guy, he gets it. He knows. Like there's just something in him. He's just like, he just knows. And I see Ram Dass as just an extension, I guess, of the spirit of Maharaji in the West. Like, I guess, it's all just like one being. I almost see them as just a conjunction of one being, and they're one to me. Like that, it's not even like they're two different physical vessels. Like their message is one. Their spirit is one. Like their frequency that they are is one. And I don't know. I listen to other people like Alan Watts and Timothy Leary, Terrence McKenna, which are all very valuable. But there's something about Ram Dass. I don't know what it is. Like just the way that he spoke, I could tell that he knew, like I said, he knew that he was this transmission for Maharaji. And I don't know. It just struck a chord in me that is really indescribable. And I think other people can attest to it, that he just strikes a chord in what it means to be a humble servant, to be Ram Dass, a servant of God. And I just forever grateful for him serving us in the way that he did. I see him as I don't know if I guess I could see him as a guru. It's just that like I don't know, I have multiple gurus. I see the guru in others, but there's something about Ram Dass that allowed me to be able to see the guru in others. He was like, there's no like ladder, there's no rankings, but if there were rankings, he would be number one for me, most likely. Like if there was a list of speakers that are past now that I could go see live and speak, Alan Watts, Terrence McKenna, Timothy Leary, Ram Dass, Robert Anton Wilson, 100% I would go see Ram Dass, even though I would probably learn more rational ways of thinking in other, I don't know. It's just like, I wouldn't necessarily learn more from Ram Dass. I would just want to be in his presence. And I think that speaks volumes. Like there's something about that. Like I don't even necessarily have to listen to what he's saying. It's like how he's saying it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and the way you said that, it's exactly how I feel about him. I actually feel teary-eyed right now. It's like he's like here in this space with us. But Ram Dass was always an extension of Maharaji, you know, and he talked about really himself being like a puppet, right? But through his life, he really surrendered. And in that last decade of his life, especially in the last few years, he like really, there was, to my eyes, there was like nothing else left. It was just Maharaji. And I wrote him a letter shortly before he died. I was supposed to go back to visit to see him, and he died before I did. I felt peace about it because I just said everything that I wanted to say in the letter, and I got confirmation that it was read to him. And I don't know if I even could have had the bravery to say it to him in person anyway, but I told him, I said, you know, I know that, like, I know you're a separate incarnation. The thing is Ram Dass had this trip, you know, people always wanted to put him on a pedestal, and he's always like, you know, look, it's Maharaji. And so I think he even let go of that though in those last few months. But I just said, you know, I know that you're your own incarnation, but in my heart of hearts, you are no different to me than Neem Karoli Baba. It's like Ram Dass has become Maharaji's form for me now. Like I'm reading a book about Neem Karoli Baba right now, and it's putting me in such a sweet space. But when I'm in front of my puja table, I look at Ram Dass. Like when I want to pull an image, like an image of God into my mind, it's Ram Dass's face. And the second that his face is there, it's just an instant reminder. It just instantly puts me in that remembrance of love. Mm-hmm. And the truth is I feel closer to Ram Dass now than even when I lived with him. And I can't explain that. But in my one-on-one work, I've talked to people throughout the whole world, people that never even met him in person, that say the same thing. So, you know, I can say that Ram Dass is my guru. Maharaji is my guru. But really, I mean, but yeah. Ram Dass is an extension of Maharaji, but like, in my heart of hearts, there's just no separation between them at all anymore.
Yep.
And that's just how that's my current inner spiritual map. I mean, that's me being as transparent and honest as I can.
Mm-hmm. And all of us here are an extension of Ram Dass.
Yeah.
You know, the spirit of Ram Dass. Not saying like I am literally Ram Dass. I'm saying like just like you said, this conversation is, when anybody tuning in to this conversation is an extension of this. Like I said at the beginning, it's like this contagion. It's this baton that's being passed of love. And it's like Ram Dass knew. It's like he somehow knew that. And I feel that vibe in his words. And yeah, man, like you said, he's not here in the physical form, but he's here more than ever now. He's everywhere. He's in all of us. He's in all of our hearts. Not even he, like it, like that transmission, that frequency, whatever it is, that ineffable feeling that we all have. We all know it's here and it's with us forever. And yeah, man, it was just for a little bit in time. It was as Richard Alpert, you know, it was just in that vessel. It was just Maharaji for a little bit, and it needed to be in that time and place for that specific point of time. But now, you know, that's long gone, and we're here in this new age in a way where it's like, yeah, he's not here in the physical form, but he is here. He is here. He's still here. That was his book, right? He's still here.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. And he is here in this conversation. And the truth is, I mean, he is you, you know, I mean, yeah.
Well, he's me, he's you, he's the listener.
Yeah.
Everybody.
I mean,
that's the thing.
This is this is grace manifesting in this moment. And this is exactly like whoever's listening right now, and you and I, like right now, this is exactly the way that grace is manifested in this moment. This is a perfect manifestation of the universe manifesting perfectly. And there's nothing else to say. It's just here we are.
Here we are. Namaste. Yeah. Oh man, that's great. I think we can probably wrap it up at that, but I have one more question for you.
Okay.
What do you want?
I'll tell you what I told, the other thing I told Ram Dass in that last letter that I wrote him is that essentially what I said was, you know, when I used to think of my time with you, I thought what changed me was that you loved me more than I'd ever experienced. And that's true. Not that it was personal, but just, you know, he showed me unconditional love in the depth of my being. But what I came to realize is that really what changed me is that I loved him unconditionally. And that gave me an avenue for like how to just practice doing that with anyone, with the world, to like really truly love unconditionally. And what I want is to continue to find ways to serve Ram Dass. I just always want to be of service to him the same way I was at the house. It's just that now the form has changed. I'm of service to him in a different way through various service projects, through speaking like we are right now, through whatever it is. And through the one-on-one work I do with people. But that's at the core. I just want to keep being of service to Ram Dass because, you know, my mind has all sorts of other desires and things, but that unconditional love, what I want is that to be at the forefront of whatever I'm doing. And that's what I want more than anything. You know? Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of love.
Yeah.
So love, serve, and remember.
Love, serve, and remember.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was great. Got any last words, or you want to just wrap it up at that?
No, we can wrap it up at that. I feel, I'm just feeling gratitude and love for you, and I feel like you and I are spiritual brothers on this path. And even though we're meeting for the first time, I feel connected to you. And so I'm like, how cool that we can be on different sides of the country, but just be in this space right now together. It's incredible.
Yeah. Same to you, Sitaram.
Yeah.
What a time to be alive.
Absolutely.
You have anything you want to plug?
Oh, sure. Yeah. The main thing, the majority of my service work is through the Sacred Community Project. And, you know, I'll send you all the info for that, but it's at sacredcommunityproject.org. And we do outreach to people in the prison system. We also offer one-on-one spiritual support to anyone who reaches out. Our mission is to lower the barriers of access to contemplative and devotional practices. So that's through teachings, sacred art and media, sacred music. And we're under the fiscal sponsorship of Hanuman Maui, which is the Hanuman temple that's grown out of Ram Dass's home on Maui. And so through that, we can take tax-deductible donations. So we're in need of support in that way. But also, if anyone listening to this resonates in any way, and if anyone wants some support, you can also reach out. And it's all of our support is offered on a free and donation-based basis. So that is available. And that's really it right now. That's really where my heart is at. That's really where I'm pouring the majority of my energy into. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this was a great talk. Thank you very much, Sitaram Dass, coming on here.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you very much for anyone that listened. And other than that, peace out.
Yeah.